In this episode of MoTeC Garage, presented by Sparesbox, we install a MoTeC 4-wheel drive controller and get our GR Yaris into the 10s. If you've been watching our GR Yaris build series, you'll know that it was my goal to be the first GR Yaris in the world into the 10s. Now, we didn't quite get there, but we are into the 10s now. More on that later. Essentially, a catch-up on what happened is last year we made 350 kilowatts at the hubs and essentially became, well, as far as we know, the most powerful Yaris in the world. We went to the track, ran 11.4, but we destroyed the clutch because it wasn't designed for that sort of power. Since then, we got a new clutch and a front LSD installed, and we're pretty much ready to go back to the track. But the problem was, it was almost Christmas, and any day where the track was open, it was either 38 degrees or hammering down with rain. The weather here has been terrible over summer. And then we were hit with Christmas, New Year's, summer nats, holidays, there was all sorts of COVID dramas, etc. And essentially, I have not had a single day where I've been in Sydney, the track's been open, and it hasn't been raining. I've been dying to get back to the track and get into the 10s. Now, in the meantime, the guys from eCanoe Racing over in the Middle East, they ended up being the first into the 10s. And you know what? Hats off to them. They went back to the track 3 times in a week to try and be the first into the 10s, and they got there. So well done to those guys. Many thought I'd be upset about it. To be honest, it's actually been an honour to go toe-to-toe with the guys from eCanoe Racing, because how many people in the world can say that they've gone toe-to-toe with eCanoe for world records? It's not something that many people can either achieve or afford. So it's been actually a pretty good compliment to go toe-to-toe with them. And they even went and bought the same turbo kit from Golby's Parts as we use, although slightly larger compressor. So I guess it's a, I don't know, compliment is a form of flattery, right? So it's been a great experience with them. Now, them going 1098 and being the first in the 10s, the pressure was off a little bit for me to try and beat that straight away. And then essentially the guys from MoTeC and PowerTune asked us if they could use our car to develop their 4-wheel drive controller. So we dropped it off to PowerTune to see what would happen.
So the next piece of development that we've embarked on with the Yaris is the 4-wheel drive control system. So factory, the car has a separate ECU that controls the center differential in the car, which is actually on the nose of the rear diff. You may see that if you've had a look underneath your Yaris. And basically what we've done is we've removed the factory OEM computer and we've allowed the MoTeC to control that lockup. So that gives us a great range of benefits where we can drive the car in a circuit setup, drag setup, street setup, and we can make adjustments to the 4-wheel drive system and how it actually locks up. So rather than being stuck to the 3-position dial that you've got, where you've got normal, track and sport, we can now dictate all sorts of ways to lock up the 4-wheel drive controller. So the system's fully programmable. It basically takes in torque requests and torque output, and we can basically set up a table in 3 dimensions that allows us to dictate maybe vehicle speed, where we might want a lot of 4-wheel drive lockup off the line, but then we want to remove the parasitic loss after about half track at, say for example, the drag strip, and we make the car front wheel drive, because after about half track, it's already hooked up. So one of the really cool benefits of it is being able to put the car into 2-wheel drive at the click of a button. So when we're at the drags, what we can actually do is we can roll into the water, click the handbrake up just 1 click, and then we can actually perform a 2-wheel drive burnout to clean the front tyres, and then drop the handbrake halfway through the burnout, which engages 4-wheel drive, allows the rears to spin just a little bit, and basically scrubs our tyres off, ready for a nice clean run. So one of the things that we can do that actually furthers this is link a power map, so to speak, to a 4-wheel drive map. Now what that means is that with the dial, we can actually set, say for example, track mode might be 30 pounds of boost, maybe say 300 kilowatts. That may require a separate 4-wheel drive lockup map versus say the all-out power of say 350 kilowatts or something like that. And that's selectable from the driver switch that's in the center console. So there is one other offer out there at the moment from another manufacturer. That solution though replaces the ECU with an additional ECU. It also requires separate tuning from a separate device and obviously an additional cost for that hardware. The benefit of the MoTeC system is that effectively it's just a patch harness that runs from the existing OEM 4-wheel drive ECU and connects to the existing patch box that's in the MoTeC kit. So one of the things with this system is that we needed to test it. So at the moment, it was an untested system that was theoretical. We've put it into practice, and now we've actually applied it onto this car, purely because the car makes enough power to actually be usable. Also driving it in all different driving scenarios, so whether that be drag, circuit, street, all those types of things. So we're actually using it in all the different scenarios that this controller will actually benefit the car, and we're able to test it in all of those scenarios, provide really good feedback, and any improvements that we need to make, we can make to that system. So the first thing is, we put the car onto the dyno. We needed to make sure that we're able to map all the different four-wheel drive lockup to a current figure. So what we're going to do is we'll throw that onto the dyno and give you a bit of a look through exactly how that system's working. So we've just come off the dyno, and as you can see here behind me, I've got all of the different runs that we've performed on the car on the chassis dyno. Now, a couple of things to point out. We've run the car on the chassis dyno because we need to be able to see the torque split between the front and rear axle on the car. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we've done this at wastegate pressure because there's no real point in doing it on high boost at the moment. We're just looking at the torque split. So whether it's more power or less power, it doesn't matter. The split still actually is the same. So the system in the Yaris actually uses an electrical solenoid that uses current to lock up the center differential. So what we'll actually see here is that as we apply more current, we actually get more rear drive to the rear axle. So the graphs on the screen show the torque at the front axle, the torque at the rear axle, and the torque split. Over on the other screen here, we can see that the torque total number always remains the same. So this means that our results aren't skewed. It's basically showing us that as we apply more current to the center differential, we get more rear drive, which actually results in up to about 80% of the drive being transferred to the rear axle at the most current that we can deliver. And pretty much, well, we know that we can make the car front wheel drive with no current being applied to the differential. So the thing to remember is that when we started this, we don't have any idea or indication as to how much current controls how much drive at the rear axle. So that's the important part of this testing. This allows us to basically understand what current delivers what amount of drive to the rear axle, put that into the base map and into the files that you guys will all have in your ECUs, and you're able to select, I want 50% lock, and the amount of current that's actually applied to that solenoid is already dictated and set up in the base map. So there's probably three more things that we need to do after the dyno. They are test the car at the drags, test the car on the street, and then test the car on the circuit. Now with the street, we can't thrash the car due to legal reasons, and we don't have millions of private test roads. So we were able to drive it on the street, get a good feel for it, make sure that it operates like sort of factory, and then we headed off to the drags to test it at the drag strip. So back from the drag strip, basically there was a couple of things that we found early on, and I actually had to do a number of different runs to sort of nut out the system and apply some bug fixes and sort of improvements to how the system was actually working. So what you would have seen in the drag runs is that in the first two runs, the car actually takes off in two-wheel drive and then engages four-wheel drive, just past the 60-foot mark. So I had to pedal the car to get it to hook up and take off. So we've made some improvements to that, and then on the third run you can see that the car takes off in four-wheel drive, launches with all four wheels, and the 60-foot time comes down drastically. So the result of a 10-second pass was pretty surprising. We weren't going for that. I mean, it was literally to set up and test the four-wheel drive system. It's a little bit of a bonus. The time that we did run could have been a little bit better. At the end of the run, we actually blew a boost hose off as I selected fifth gear. So fifth gear was effectively done in NA. So there's a little bit there. I mean, we can certainly go back and we can actually try and run a faster number now. But like I said, the whole day was about testing the four-wheel drive system and getting a good understanding and improving it so that when everybody else has access to this system, they've got something that's set up and ready to go. So people have probably got questions to ask as to why I didn't rerun the car after the boost hose come off. Now, we've encountered a small issue with the car, and that is that it's pressurized the cooling system and pushed a small amount of coolant out of the header tank. Now, this is not necessarily a big problem. This is quite typical in modified cars, and especially in something that's got a standard unopened engine. So as soon as this all sort of happened at the drags, we decided, okay, cool, that's enough for tonight. We'll bring the car back to the shop and just check everything over, because there's no point in, hurting the car further when it's unnecessary. So we brought the car back to the shop. And a couple of things that we found is that the header tank for the coolant, the cap has actually become sticky and stuck open. So that means that the cooling system can't actually pressurize. And when it does actually get any form of pressure in it, just from temperature, it actually pushes the coolant out of the little nipple that's on that header tank and just sprays it everywhere in the engine bay. Off to Toyota to get a brand new cap, put that onto the car, we can then pressure test the cooling system. So we did that, and the cooling system come back, everything was fine. There was no cooling system leaks or anything like that. We did find on the return drive from the track back to the shop that the car wanted to overheat slightly. So we sussed out the thermostat on the car and actually found it sticking also. So it was actually stuck in the closed position or very, very slightly open. So what we've actually done at the moment for the car is remove the thermostat just to prove that was our issue in terms of overheating. So that was removed, and that system's come back fine. We then compression tested the car, which come back perfectly fine, 210 PSI across all 3 cylinders. And then we performed a leak down, which come back perfect as well. So that tells us that the engine health is actually quite good, and that most likely we've just stretched the factory head studs. It's quite common in performance cars, especially when you're working with factory head studs. Generally just means that you've exceeded cylinder pressures, that the studs can no longer seal the cylinder correctly. So what we would typically do is replace this with an aftermarket stud, like an ARP item. We may also change the head gasket and apply a higher clamping force to the head to hold it onto the block. The other question that you might be asking is, why haven't other people encountered this as well? Now, this particular car has copped countless dyno runs, 50 plus at least at this sort of power level. It's been raced on the circuit, at the drags, everywhere, and also street driving as well. So, it happens over time. This isn't something that's just happened spontaneously. To be honest, we probably expected it would happen 100 kilowatts ago on the dyno when we turned the boost up, but it didn't. So over time, basically the metal's fatigued in the head stud and it's now starting to stretch. So with a stretched head stud, it doesn't always happen in just one dyno run, which it can happen. Let's say, for example, we turn the boost up on a car, we do a run and it completely pressurizes the cooling system and covers the floor in coolant. That can happen. But it's not always the case. When you actually run very close to the limit of the head stud, over time the metal will fatigue through heat cycles, through everything else, and basically you're just on the very edge, and over time it just becomes so weak that it eventually just stretches and starts to leak. But we're going to probably pull it apart, have a bit of a look, and see what we can find.
So there's a couple of questions left to be asked. The first one is, what's going to happen in regards to giving the car away with LMCT+? Well, that's still happening. It might take an extra couple of weeks, but we'll get the car sorted, do what we've got to do, and then give it away with LMCT+. So make sure that you join in the link below to become a member of LMCT+, so you can win our GR Yaris. Now, the other question is, what are we doing to sort it out? Well, the car right now is with a friend of mine who is a Toyota technician and works on a lot of race cars. He is going to basically pull the head off, analyse the head studs, see if they stretched and work out the exact problem. And we're either going to put a brand new head gasket and studs in, or if we can find an aftermarket solution that works, we may do that also. We're going to get all that in and install the new Kelford camshafts that we have thanks to Golby's Parts, who are the Australian supplier of Kelford cams. They're a bolt-in camshaft with more lift, more duration, so pretty excited about testing them in a future video. And there is one more thing we're doing to the car, right here. I think that logo speaks for itself. So make sure you subscribe, stay tuned for the next couple of videos on our GR Yaris, because things are about to get even more serious.